And so I think there was some progress. That said, he got into office and started, not living up to that idea. I just did a panel earlier that was specifically Trump, genius, or lunatic, and I said that I think he's just a narcissist, and I think most of the stuff that he has said and done has been for attention. That said, the courts are the issue that I'm probably most afraid of. I think that obviously Gorsuch being appointed to the Supreme Court may not have changed the makeup of the Supreme Court right then, but it certainly was very different than what it would have been had Hillary Clinton won, and it took away an opportunity for us to try to have a Supreme Court that was equality-minded. I'll say the same thing that I did in my last panel, and then I'll be quiet and let Guy go. As much as I am bothered by Donald Trump and his lack of clarity, I think that's probably the thing that scares me the most, is because he doesn't have, you just really don't know. He says one thing and he does another. He tweeted about the transgender military ban, but that's not policy, and I kind of think he'll never be policy because he just was trying to distract the news for a while. I just don't know what he's doing, but I do know what Mike Pence would do, and so there's a little piece of me that would rather Donald Trump stay president and get jack shit done for 4 years, as he's so successfully done for 6 months, than have Mike Pence become president and get a lot done in 4 years. So. How do you feel about that, Guy?
Well, so as you heard in the introduction, I wrote a book 2 years ago with my co-author Mary Catherine Ham,
which is wonderful, by the way.
Thank you.
I will say, as a avowed liberal, wonderful.
Thank you. You should definitely buy it. We have
I'll let you borrow mine.
A new edition. Typical. A new edition is coming out this week, and we've spent the last 2 years really crisscrossing the country selling the book mostly to conservative audiences. And I came out in the book publicly. My family knew, my friends knew, but it was not a public thing. And we wrote so much about gay rights in one of the chapters, I felt like I had to disclose it. And so in a footnote, I came out as gay. I did an interview with Megyn Kelly, who's a rock star. And this comes up in our talk every time we speak to conservative audiences, because we're addressing gay marriage, and she and I both happen to be conservatives who are for gay marriage. And I quickly mentioned I happen to be gay myself, and you get some surprise from the crowd. I just wanted to give you guys a sense of the reaction that I've gotten throughout these travels, and then there's some data to back it up as well. 2 anecdotes. One was we were in Denver, Colorado at a very conservative event, pretty Christian conservative event, and we were doing the book signing. We had a great big line, and we're taking pictures and signing books, and this lovely little woman came up to me, and she sort of in hushed tones, wasn't exactly sure how she wanted to say it or the correct words, and she said, I just want to tell you that the way that you've done everything, and I have a nephew, and he's the way you are. And we just love you, and none of that matters to us. And that was a really heartening experience for me. And she was channeling a lot of a sentiment that I think anticipated. The other example was from Albuquerque, New Mexico. This was just a few months ago. Very conservative crowd, older crowd. And someone during the Q&A asked Mary Catherine, there was the Day Without Women. Remember the Day Without Women? That whole thing? What did you do, Mary Catherine, on your Day Without Women? And she gave this whole answer. And then I think the person in the audience felt bad that I'd been left out of the question. She said, well, Guy, what did you do on your Day Without Women? I'm like, that's every day for me. If you know what I mean. And I wasn't sure, should I make that joke with this audience? And it went over really well. And it's sort of like the air went out of the room in terms of any tension, and it got a laugh, and everyone was chill with it. So anecdotes aren't data, but there's also data. Pew Research came out with a new national survey just a few weeks ago that showed that among Republicans in America, support for gay marriage is now exactly even. There has been a 52-point swing in favor of gay marriage among Republicans in the last 10 years. And that is driven, you can clap for that. And that's driven in particular by younger Republicans and younger conservatives. Among millennial conservatives, it's about 60 to 65% support gay marriage. So I really do believe in a number of ways LGBT issues, especially same-sex marriage, it's just generational. At some point, it's going to be a complete non-issue for Republicans and Democrats alike. We're just not quite there yet. So I'll leave it at that for now and look forward to the conversation.
So what I'm troubled by, just hearing you talk, and I'm brief flowing here, is what would have happened had you had Gorsuch on the Supreme Court when the matter came up before the Supreme Court a few years back with the Weber law? I mean, I think we're in a very peculiar time because the popular vote winner, who was by all accounts supposed to win, didn't. And so we've got this, we're in this position where we're taking steps backward. And how do we solve that problem? And when we're sort of tide of public opinion is moving one way, and yet you see these regressive stances by the man who's sitting in the White House as executive branch. And I think the answer to that is really coalition building. Like, we have Republicans and Democrats, liberal and conservative, on this panel, and I think it would be, it's sort of a time now where we have to look to each other to stick together and sort of build coalitions with one another to protect our rights and our interests. Because everything right now in the media is like liberal versus conservative, Republican versus Democrat. I hate that. It is so dumb. If you guys are watching the news and you see everything framed as a Republican versus Democrat issue, you have to start asking them, why? Why is everything being boxed into this dichotomy of false choice? You know, we can have common ground, we can build coalitions, we can, you know, seek to unite on certain issues, and that's something that we are not seeing, and I think the answer to that is to start talking to each other once again. We're not talking to each other anymore, we're just shouting at each other. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and I totally agree with the not talking to each other part as well. I mean, I agree with a lot of what was said, but particularly that part. I came out in 1999, and I remember what America was like in 1999 on LGBTQ issues, and I struggled. Part of the reason I struggled so long, I mean, I think I knew since I was like 7 or 8, but I struggled so long because I probably knew I was a Republican before I knew I was gay.
Wow.
But I was told you couldn't be both, you know, and
yes.
So that that kept me in the closet for a lot longer than I probably needed to be. And when I came out, it was a mixed bag. I mean, there were people in the party. I became active in local politics as soon as I came out, and there were Republicans who were supportive, there were Republicans who weren't. The difference I've seen happen since 1999 within my own party tells me that this is it constantly is going in the right direction. I think that there has definitely been some setbacks this week that a lot of people have been, it's obviously been in the news, and it can feel like, oh, we're going backwards and there's no stopping it. I don't think that's true. I mean, I think this movement has always had 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I mean, and we've learned from the steps back. We learned in California when Prop 8 happened, we learned that we didn't really fight against that message properly, and we came back stronger. And something that we also learned throughout all these debates is that it does take talking to each other. It's going to take Republicans and Democrats to finish the journey of equality. This isn't going to happen by just, going to our corners and saying, my side's right and your side's wrong, and I'm going to call you names. It has happened. It's changed so much because we as human beings have approached other human beings on a human level and said, I am this person. We have a lot of other things that we probably agree on other than maybe this one issue. Let's start there and talk. And maybe we'll find that there's a lot of common ground. And it's through that discussion that just in a very short period of time, the country's gone from being, against something like marriage equality to being supportive of it in both parties. And, and I think that there's a little bit of a catch-up that needs to happen on trans rights. I think there's been more time, there's been more discussion for a longer period of time on being gay or lesbian. It's going to take some time to get there on trans rights, but it's going in the right direction. We just have to keep fighting and we have to keep talking.
So I think being at the very end of a panel, making a list is always interesting. But people on this panel seem very optimistic. And I feel like I have some optimism, but I also want to really raise some of the concerns. And particularly the concern I see right now is an onslaught opposing the trans community and trans rights. And we have to be addressing that. So, you know, there is the military tweet that Donald Trump did, which isn't even policy, but sort of creating that narrative and dehumanization. And then there's all the other little things that are happening, whether it's the Department of Education and the Department of Justice rescinding trans guidance in schools, the Health and Human Services Department rescinding non-discrimination or giving notice of their intent to rescind non-discrimination in healthcare on trans issues. HUD, right? HUD, our department that is most responsible for homeless youth. And right now, about 40% of LGBTQ homeless youth in this city are LGBTQ. And that's vastly disproportionate. And HUD is literally removing, its tools to implement non-discrimination. So I feel concerned. And I think we're really just at the start. And so, and I feel like it's that slow chipping away. I think some things get a lot of attention, but because so much of our success under the Obama administration was regulatory and was part of these administrative systems, that these slow chipping aways, which are harder to address and harder to get momentum around to sort of fight back, I'm afraid that's going to have real long-term consequences.
Before I pose another question, does anyone want to respond to what Tara just said or what anyone else has said? Otherwise, I will ask you a question. It looked like Alex wanted to say something. That's why
I was just going to use profanities. I was just going to say that Donald Trump, the man has not stepped foot near the military, and he was a 5-time draft jocker. He has some nerve telling us who can and can't serve in the military, honestly.
See, I could tell Alex wanted to say something. All right. Well, I'm going to go. I have a foundational question that's setting up for another one that I'm going to pose to the Republicans on the panel in a minute. But I would like to hear from, not everybody has to answer this, but I think a lot of this is a question about, what do we really think full lived equality looks like? LGBTQ equality, what does that look like? And is it something, beyond full recognition of our identities and our relationships? And I ask this in part because I think it's, some people have narrower versions, some people have broader, visions of what that is. I think it's also at the crux of where some people, frankly, as you alluded to, Matthew, think you can't be gay and a Republican at the same time. So I just want to, I don't know if anyone wants to speak to that, but what's your vision of sort of what full LGBTQ equality looks like? When will we know we got there? I don't think necessarily anyone thinks that marriage was necessarily that moment, but where do you think it goes, and how broad does it go? And then we can talk about what that sort of means for implications for policy in other areas.
Republicans?
No, that's for everybody.
I'm happy to start.
Yeah,
I guess I don't know that there ever comes a time where you just, I was thinking about this with any journey of any group. We look at the civil rights struggle in this country, there's never really come a point where we just said, oh, we're done, or we've got full equality. I don't know that you ever totally get there, as long as there is an incident or there is something that happens that marginalizes someone in our group. What I will say is I think what we should aspire to is towards that, and what that would look like is a day when we don't have employment discrimination, when we don't have people feeling like they're targeted because of who they love. That's the biggest thing for me, and I think we'll know it to some extent that it's happened when groups like the group that I'm part of, Log Cabin Republicans, or Stonewall Democrats, and groups like that no longer need to exist because there's not really any relevancy to it anymore. There isn't really just a whole lot of people who feel like they need to be part of something that's separate from everyone else. because the equality is really is at such a point that they feel just part of society, not necessarily part of a specific group. And I see that happening more like in the millennial generation, where they don't tend to necessarily hang out only at gay bars. People who are millennials and gay that I've met, it's like they don't feel the need to go to gay bars the way when I grew up. It was like that's the only place you felt you could go to be yourself, where you could be safe. And because they grew up in a time, to some extent, where they didn't have to deal with some of that, especially those that live maybe in more urban centers, then, I think that you start to kind of have, as the generations go on, a feeling that we're more, just individuals and made up of who we are instead of putting us into certain buckets. And that maybe is what at least close to full equality could look like.
Thanks for that, Matthew. Tara? Yeah.
So I don't think we're going to have full equality in the LGBT community until we address intersecting oppression. So LGBTQ people are not just LGBTQ. They're Black, they're undocumented, they're women, they're seniors on food stamps. And so if we are gonna, right now, nearly 40% of all incarcerated women across this country are lesbian and bisexual. The likelihood of acquiring HIV for an African American male who is gay or bisexual is 1 in 2 over the course of their lifetime. Wow. In just a few months ago, an undocumented Latina trans woman was arrested and detained by ICE in the very courthouse where she was obtaining a domestic violence restraining order. And so the only way we're going to get that full equality is if we're addressing all these intersecting issues. And I think it goes back to the point you were making earlier, which is we have to work in coalition.
Yes.
Anybody else want to say anything in response to that?
Why are you winking at me?
I'm a winker. It was actually totally involuntary.
I think when we stop having to ask the question, how we get there, and it's sort of shocking to me that we are still asking that question about how we get there. Hillary Clinton did that big speech when she was at the State Department in 2011 on gay rights or human rights and gay rights, and she talked about transgender individuals during that speech. And I think one of the main points she made, and I think it's good, is that these are our friends and our neighbors, and because they are human rights, our governments are bound to protect them. And right now, our government isn't protecting those rights. And the way we get there, as we've said over and over again, is we have to look to each other to pull each other up.
Thanks. Okay, so now this question is to Matthew and Guy. I'd love to hear your perspective. Guy, you talked about how obviously you feel like there is some positive movement, happening. Matthew sort of implicitly alluded to that, within the party. I'm curious to hear from your perspective, like what role you think gay Republicans do serve, and I guess to understand more how you square sort of like the progress that you're seeing both anecdotally and in the data with sort of things like the sheer number of anti-LGBTQ political appointees and the positions that still feel pretty starkly anti, frankly. I'd just like to hear your perspective on that, either piece of it.
So I think for me, just living my life normally every day is just kind of a small contribution to just our like Fox News viewers, town hall readers, people, groups that I speak to, just showing up and just nonchalantly being like, P.S. I'm gay. I agree with you on taxes. I agree with you on X, Y, and Z issues. We agree on this stuff. We're not necessarily going to agree over here. And I don't automatically believe that because you don't agree with me on this policy issue, it means that you hate me, right? I think that using that word and indicting an entire large group of people as hateful, I think turns a lot of people off and says like, whoa, that's really unfair, I'm mad now. That does not mean that homophobia does not exist, as I see every day in my Twitter mentions. So it's a balancing act. And so the question is sometimes you get sort of angry, liberals, sometimes gay activists being like, how can you possibly be conservative? I'm not super high on the Republican Party at the moment for all sorts of reasons, but I'm a conservative. How can you possibly do that? It's like, well, because on most issues that I think about, I'm conservative. And that's sort of the way that I prioritize my worldview. But I also sort of follow up with the question, would you prefer that we not exist within the party? Would you prefer that there are not people who are trying to make a positive impact and change perspectives and perhaps bust old stereotypes within the conservative movement of the Republican Party? I think it's really important for us to be there. And I have to say, I was at the Republican convention this year covering it, and it was super weird in a lot of ways. But watching Peter Thiel on stage say proudly that he was a proud gay person and get a standing ovation from the Republican delegates, like that felt sort of like a sea change. And I know that there's criticism of the president. I'm not always a huge defender of the president on a number of issues. But the fact that, he was elected and asked about the Obergefell decision, just asked about gay marriage generally, and he's just like, I don't care. This is it's fine.
That was really good.
That was a good audition.
But because Trump has such a devoted following of his core base, I hope people who aren't on the right can think about this. The permission slip that was handed from Donald Trump to 30% of the country to be like, oh, well, he doesn't care, so what should we really, that is a valuable thing. Even if it was just a random, blurted out response in an NBC interview, it matters. So we can have disagreements on policy issues and take issue with Trump or whatever, but I think it is impossible to argue that there has not been strong progress on the right on these issues significantly in the last 5 years, and really the last 2 or 3 years.
Got it. So 3 things before we move on to Matthew. I could tell Alex wants to say something again. But also, just so folks know, I looked like some audience members were bursting with things that they wanted to say. I wanted to let you know that we will have time for questions at the end, so hold your feelings and your questions.
It's hard.
Matthew, do you want to add anything?
I echo Guy's sentiments, especially I remember watching that convention speech by Peter Thiel, and as someone, as I mentioned earlier, who, had come out a lot of years earlier when the Republican Party would never have had the person that was presenting the candidate for president be openly gay, call out the party. Let's not forget, he actually called out the party in that speech and said, stop it with these transgender bathroom issues. Let's focus on economics. Let's focus on the things that make the country work and that people vote for Republicans on, not getting into these social issues. And he called out the party on that. And not enough is said of that. And I was emotional about it because it felt validating for all the work that I try to do within my organization, within the party, to make the party better. And I think that both of our sides, whether you're on the left or you're a Democrat or you're on the right and Republican, need to make both of our sides better, because ultimately, at the end of the day, both sides, the LGBTQ community should have a choice who they vote for and be able to feel good about it, right? And there's work that needs to be done on both sides in different ways. We're trying to do our work by engaging, and I've seen the efforts of that. I've seen where the party's gone. I joined Log Cabin in 2012, and I remember even just where we were then as a party. I remember going to my first state GOP convention, and we weren't a chartered organization yet. Log Cabin Republicans, which had been around since 1977, still wasn't a chartered organization within the California Republican Party. And we had been fighting for it for a long time. We finally did it in 2015. And there were, we were nervous about it, but 75 to 80% of the delegates in California voted to support us for chartering. 2 years later, we were up for rechartering, and it was basically a unanimous vote. So even in 2 years, it had gone from 75, 80% to basically everyone. No one stood up to oppose our nomination for chartering. We have, as my vice chair, Gina Roberts, who's trans, who has met with Betsy DeVos, who's met with members of the administration, who's actually going out there and meeting with people who wouldn't necessarily, you would think, would be understanding or open to anyone who's trans, and she's just being honestly herself and saying, hey, you know what? I like to go to the range and fire a gun. I believe in tax reform, I believe in this, but I'm also trans. So let's start with the first couple issues and talk about where we agree on that, and then let's actually talk about, you know, where we maybe don't, but find some common ground. That's how we've moved the country forward on any issue. That's what we have to continue to do in the Republican Party. There shouldn't, to walk away from it, as I've had a lot of friends tell me, you should just resist, you should just walk away from the party altogether. I don't think that's the solution. If you believe that the last journey of equality lies on the Republican side, the only way we're going to get there, because they still win elections, as we know, is to change their hearts and minds by going to them and by sharing our stories.
This is exactly what I'm talking about when I say coalition building. Like, the Republican Party has done nothing to advance anything over the last 20 years. I mean, I do feel that way, but it's like, when I hear you say that, I think, God, like, we do need you. We need you to we need people like you guys to go back to your party and help, you know, be the voice that draws the party more towards our direction. You know,
it's not their responsibility alone.
No.
And I think that progressives, I'll say Democrats, because I'm sitting here just trying to think as I listen, and I gotta say I feel a little bit bad. I don't like the fact that we have put these two on the spot as Republicans to defend.
We're used to it.
No. I know, but I think that's a problem, and I think that's a problem that sometimes I forget all the damn time. What am I talking about? We forget as Democrats and as liberals or as progressives or as conservatives. Both sides do it. So I went to a high school and interviewed some high schoolers after the election was over, and I sat with two groups of kids. We brought them together. Some had supported Trump, some had supported Hillary Clinton, and the Hillary Clinton supporters were really, really angry at the Trump supporters and were very upset that they could dare. And there were some Muslim supporters of Hillary Clinton, and they were very upset that those Republican students could dare ever vote for Donald Trump when he had said such horrible things about people who were Muslim. And how dare they must be Islamophobic, they must be racist themselves. And so I finally asked one of them, and I asked him a question. I'm going to turn it around right here, because for me, I voted for years for candidates because they supported same-sex marriage, because they supported gay issues. For me, I'll admit I was a one-issue voter sometimes, and that was my priority. It was one of my big priorities, admittedly. I don't know what your biggest priority. I don't know why you're conservative, why you're Republican, but if I get upset at Guy because his priority is lower taxes, doesn't that just make me mad at him because he's not putting my needs before what are his? You know, if your priority is lowering taxes, or you want right to own a gun, or take it into a school or a park or whatever. See, I forget. I don't think it's okay for any Democrats or any especially gay or trans Democrats to be upset with someone or not upset, or to question someone and make them defend why they are a Republican. Because everybody has issues that we prioritize, and certainly the two Republicans on this panel have the right to vote on the issues that are most important to them. And I don't agree with all Democrats. I don't agree with all Democrats, and I can't imagine you agree with all Republicans.
No.
And
I would just say, I think one actual sign of progress is that gay people and LGBTQ people don't have to be single-issue voters. We're free to have open minds and our own set of priorities. And to your point, I really appreciate what you just said about needing folks like us within our coalition, within our party. That's great. I agree. It would be super helpful if some folks on the left stopped attacking us as self-loathing or mean-spirited or any of that. I promise you I'm not self-loathing. I promise you. My boyfriend will tell you the same thing. We have a nice life, and thank God. And the thing that I would add, because this goes both ways, I also know that I would not have the freedom to think about one day proposing to my boyfriend, right? Or living a normal life as a gay man in America without the very hard work of lots of people who would never agree with my politics. Gay rights activists on the left. I have to thank them and be grateful to the hard work that they've done. So like, I want to pay homage to them and take my hat off to them and also say, now let's have sort of the toleration and the space work in both directions.
Guy, I promise to take that back to the left. I will take that back to the left.
I'm gonna ask Tara her thoughts.
Yeah,
I think Tara was trying to get in.
I mean, I think a couple things came up during this conversation. One is clearly, you know, it is great. I think the work that you all are saying, you know, that is happening in the Republican Party and that's moving forward. But it's not enough for Donald Trump to say, you know, I support LGBTQ equality when his actions are directly opposed to that. And I mean, we've already listed that. And I feel like when it gets to this notion of like, you know, I grew up in Texas. I grew up in Texas, interacted, almost everyone around me was a Republican. But the issue isn't like, you're a Republican so you hate LGBTQ people. I don't agree with that. But I think the issue is, if you're a Republican and you can't call out that actions that are Islamophobic, that are anti-LGBTQ, then it is a problem.
I think we're seeing this environment where everything has become so hyper-partisan that people would sooner side with like Vladimir Putin than they would, you know, go against their own party. And that's what we're seeing is happening a lot. And I think that that's what you're saying is absolutely right. At the same time, we have to have people within the Republican Party who are willing to say, what you just said is bullshit, Donald Trump. Like, transgender people can serve in the military, and that shouldn't even be an issue in 2017, and you're hurting America.
I think we heard that though this week. We heard a lot of Republican senators come out and say this is
Orrin
bullshit.
Hatch.
You know?
Orrin Hatch would never have come out and defended members of the military being trans 5 years ago, and did this week.
I'm also just so gratified to hear you endorsing Governor Romney's position on Russia.
And healthcare.
Sort of. Let's go there. We get to Obamacare eventually.
Go ahead, Matthew.
Can I just add one thing? I mean, I